All right, welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast, the PGA edition. It is February. We just had the Genesis Open, saw Dustin Johnson just crush the field. We had some interesting weather takes. We sort of talked about that, and that ended up sort of dominating the weekend. So we will definitely get into that, but we have a really good podcast planned for the Honda Classic this week. And as usual, I would like to introduce my co-host, which I just saw them a couple days ago. So long time no see, Pete, Colin. How you doing, buddies?
You know, I think I'm going to jump right ahead to the what did we learn section here, because the thing I've been thinking about most after this weekend, we talked a lot about, do golfers perform better, people and different partners and different playing partners that are associated with that. And I think there's an angle to there. Does that resonate with you guys? Like if you manage to pick the right partner in golf, that you'll win a lot of money over the long term as a golfer? Does that is that angle? Does that resonate with you guys? Does that make sense? Like, what am I talking about?
Partner with Colin in the game of Wolf that we had, and you're in good shape. So that was quite the performance put on Colin, which you got a decent humble brag in there, bud.
Oh man, it's not even a humble brag. I fucking dominated this whole golf trip. Oh my god, I will never run that any single gambling game, golf or otherwise, that I ever did. For those listening at home, the FantasyLabs golf trip was a slaughter. I got 14 out of 18 won, throwing a couple prop bets close to the pin tees. Like I will never run that good in gambling again, but I will not let my co-host live it down. They knew I was going to be insufferable today. I am merely living up to everybody's expectations. I cannot wait for that trip again next year, but just to continue my dominant streak. That was a fun game. I don't know.
Wow. All right. Well, let's describe the.
Did you manage to have fun? Like, was that tolerable? I don't know. I don't know what it's like to lose on a fantasy.
Let's describe the rules here first of all. We're playing Wolf, so 2 out of the 4 people win every hole. To be fair, you were the only person not to lose as the lone wolf, so that was good for you. But yeah, Colin dominated, definitely the big winner, but it wasn't like. To say it was a slaughter might be a little bit of a stretch.
14 out of 18. I mean, dude, we're grading on a curve here. That's like, if that's not, no, I'm not going to clean sweep it, but no one will. I am very happy with the results.
Yeah, no, you should be. You were the clear winner. I'm not trying to throw shade on it. And we had some interesting handicapping going on, and it was fun. Colin played the analytical guy perfectly, I thought. Bryan, you said you're more of a GPP golfer?
Yeah.
Oh no, he was hitter. Yeah, he was boomer bust the whole time. Yeah. I credit superior analytics to figuring out when he was going to boom, and that's just that's they don't teach.
He was just calculating, constantly calculating. Smart moves by Colin, but we. Sean, who's not here, is actually the big. We have to rip him a little bit.
Oh big loser.
Sean's not here. He lost badly. He just straight died. He's no longer with us. Rest in peace. I'm just gonna pour this out here, and oh man, it
was tough to watch. It was brutal.
Yep. Yeah. And credit where credit is due. Congratulations to Bryan for picking the winner in our picks last week.
Yep.
I think the scoreboard is all even. So it only took 3 weeks, but we're back to square one. We're all on the scoreboard. Now it's official.
Colin, I gotta toss you some humble pie and get a big brag in myself in the FantasyLabs golf contest.
That's right.
Where'd you finish, bud?
I actually didn't even check that. Once I saw that, I know, am I pool jumping territory? I did have to leave early, so
I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm looking it up right now, but Pete won, which is the.
What do you value more? You're finishing the FantasyLabs company pool or the Thunderdome?
I'll take the Thunderdome.
I think, I guess I would take that one too.
But I do like the victory in the FantasyLabs one. My pride was crushed in all athletic endeavors, and I got stitches, which is hilarious. But yeah, at least I won the Thunderdome in our golf pool. That was my minor bit of glory there.
We'll put them on equal weight, like company pool.
Bryan drove the green, actually overdrove the green. That was the big accomplishment right there. That was dope. And the horse champion of the house as well.
Yeah.
The horse champion. Oh yeah. Those are my claim to fame for sure. So it was a fun weekend. And we're gonna have to get Sean on the podcast. I think he joined us for one of our live podcasts for a major. So we're gonna have to get him on a podcast coming up. Maybe for the Masters, and then we'll really.
Colin could be talking big smack there. He definitely laid the beat down on Sean. To be fair, he did.
Yeah, 100%.
Sounds good. All right, well, let's jump into a little bit of what we learned last week, other than Colin's not so humble brag here. I want to talk quickly about Genesis Open. I do want to talk ownership, and Pete, if you just want to talk about your Thunderdome lineup. But first, something we've talked about is just how important weather is. And, we were together, discussing our lineups in person. And Pete, one thing that you had mentioned a lot was just like, when you saw that the weather was going to be a factor, like you just pivoted to making it the factor in your lineup building. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, I thought it had a potential to be a pretty strong weather angle. Things played out perfectly, which fortunately they did. But yeah, I already liked like a large percentage of the guys in the early morning on Thursday, so it made it easy. I liked Brooks Koepka, and he was in the afternoon, so I was fortunate to fade him. And yeah, things just worked out. Had a super chalky team in the Labs tournament outside of Thomas Peters, who was the only one out of 15 in our group. He was 20% owned in the Thunderdome, but Dustin Johnson was the uber chalk. I think he was 80% in the Thunderdome and pretty similar in our league. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, obviously it worked out with him, but my team was pretty chalky. I had Justin Rose. I had who was very heavily owned. Obviously, I had Peters, who was heavily owned in the Thunderdome relatively. I thought he was going to be a little bit more of a leverage play like he was in the Fantasy Labs League. And then Sergio, obviously, he was a guy that was pretty heavily owned, I think like 45%. And, yeah, the rest of the team, JB Holmes was heavily owned. So pretty chalky week. And I don't know how I feel about that, given that we're talking about ownership a little bit more. But definitely worked out last week, I guess.
Yeah, that ownership was something I struggle with too, especially since
I had Steele too, who was uber chalk. So I had the lover boys of our guys. So I couldn't fade my boys, but it worked out where my lowest owned guy in the Thunderdome outside of Peters was Sergio at 45%.
Right. So the way I look at kind of chalk weekends is like, you play enough GPPs and like enough of them will be like the chalk wins, just like across the board, right? Play enough games and like eventually run a tournament where it wins, right? It's tough to be results oriented on this one because I thought DJ was going to be far disproportionately owned, and he was, I think, at like 42% in the dog leg, right? Mm-hmm. Let's say that I only give you that, like, and really try not to, put your blinders on and say, like, if you knew he was going to be 42% owned, would you fade him? Yes or no?
Yeah, you end up fading him in that tournament, and I faded him more there.
I did the same thing too. I swapped out Matsuyama or DJ for Matsuyama essentially everywhere, thinking that the ratio of range of outcomes compared to ownership would be in favor of Matsuyama GPP wise. And on ownership, I was dead on. It was like Matsuyama was 17%, DJ was over 40%, and even if you think DJ is going to crush, I don't think you can ever think that anybody is a lock to crush that much, right? Let's take their head-to-head bets, right? Like, what would be the highest price, Pete, that you would have given DJ versus Matsuyama heads up as kind of an oversimplification if we're just betting matchups in Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, he's probably like 56% at best.
Yeah, so he's never going to be more than like a minus 135 like vig free heads up, right? So if his ownership balance is like almost like a 2.5 to 1, I don't care how much you like DJ. I have to believe that Matsuyama is just objectively the better play there. And so it didn't. I got smoked on that one. Matsuyama flamed out. DJ won by a country mile, and it's tough to tell yourself that, like, all right, it was the right play. And I'm always open to leaks and stuff like that, but like, I think it was still the right play in the dog leg to go Matsuyama. And I'm just like, I'm looking for you to.
Oh yeah. No, I think you're totally right. The tougher question is in like these smaller leagues and like something like a high stakes tournament where 20% of the field's paid out. So you still want to go towards something with really high expectation, but you're trying to find a little bit of leverage. So I thought the one thing about my lineup that I did like relative to the ownership was that it was correlated to the weather angle, which came to fruition. So that's one other thing that I think helped. But yeah, certainly having guys that are just so heavily owned. I mean, owning DJ didn't even move the needle this week. And it's just if you didn't own him, you were screwed. But imagine it gone the other way where he had the day that Matsuyama had. It's going to totally change the field. So I'm with you in general. And definitely in the dog leg and the bigger tournaments, I think it's a no-brainer. So we definitely want to hit on more of that stuff and who we think is going to be more, heavily owned this week. So, yeah, the LaCroix is hitting me hard here, boys.
Dude, you're cut off. Like, no more.
Yep, done with the sparkling water. But, yeah, ownership's something we'll talk about all year.
Yeah, no, it really is. It's very important. And we're even getting Colin into GPPs with the ownership stuff. So,
the only way I know how to enter is if I have ownership projections, and finally give me something to talk about.
For sure. All right, let's talk about something else that I think that we will continue to discuss in the future, which is FanDuel Golf. Colin, you have been starting a series on FanDuel Golf. You had an article that just broke down sort of the basics of the rules and the implications first off, and then you've started to get into the actual data. So for people who haven't read, can you just talk about what you found so far and what you're going to explore over the next couple of weeks here?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first two articles have just kind of explored what does projected scoring look like under the new scoring system. And the new scoring system has a couple of wrinkles for those who haven't read up on it. There are no points awarded for finishing positions, and you have to pick 8 golfers, 4 in rounds 1 through 2 and 4 in rounds 3 for 4. And it's pretty much like a variation on scored on birdies, bogeys, pars. And it's trying to figure out what does that mean from a practical roster construction standpoint. It basically, I think the way it's going to shake out in the first couple of weeks as everyone's figuring this out, and this is backed up by the way the projections go, is it's going to be stars in the second half and scrubs in the first half, because there's so little differentiation in terms of like differences in projected outcomes in the first half that everybody, just from a points maximization perspective, is incentivized to go that route. The second article that I did today talks about the idea of is someone or can someone be disproportionately good in the first 2 rounds and disproportionately bad in rounds 3 for 4. That's borne out a little bit, and that does happen in the wild. It's a little bit of a predictable, repeatable skill, at least from a predictive standpoint. What I'm curious on is a subjective angle. And Pete, this is where I really love to get your opinion. I mean, you watch a lot more golf than I do, which is in this case, it's just watching golf at all. But
not true. You watched golf this weekend.
I was strapped to a chair. It was against my will. It doesn't count. But like, even from anecdotally sweating some of these games, it seems like there are people like Brendan Steele and Ryan Palmer who seem like they can come out of the gate strong in rounds 1 through 2 and fade down the stretch. I could come up with a lot of reasons why they may do that and why just talking about a human being they may do that. But I'm wondering if you think there's a subjective basis in that. And like, if you could look at a guy and say like, yeah, he's strong in the first half, weak in the second half, and I know why from watching him. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tough, honestly. I mean, it's hard to quantify that. A couple guys who haven't won, you can see them choking in the big stage, like Sergio's, historically choked in the majors, and now it's built up to a pretty decent sample size. But for the most part, I think the good golfers it's going to bear out over time. So Steele's been frustrating. I'm not sure if there's anything to take away from that, but definitely I do think that, someone gets a win, especially in a big setting, it can help them in the future on Sundays, because there is a lot of nerves. And one thing that definitely is a human element that I'm sure has some impact, I just don't know how to quantify it, is, some of these guys are golfing and they're financially secure for the rest of their lives. Some of these guys are golfing and they need to, absolutely capitalize on this window on Sunday or whatever to make sure they have financial stability for the next 5 years, So there is some human element of that, and I'm sure it affects some guys a lot and some guys not very much. But Brendan Steele, Ryan Palmer, those are hard situations for me to gauge, I guess, which doesn't help at all. But I think it's hard to point to something and say, okay, you can quantify it this way.
Yeah, no, that's actually the financial security angle is an interesting one, and I'm just trying to figure out how that would play out, right? Like, let's say that like all else equal, I like 2 guys equally for the Thursday, Friday round. One's financially set, the other's hungry. Where do you make this, like,
yeah, you could probably do that with like career earnings and stuff like that. And if you could find any data on like,
how does that actually impact like a tiebreaker?
Well, you take the guy, based on that theory, you take the guy who's financially secure on the weekends.
Okay. And like all right, well, yeah, but then like there's almost a weird counter argument where like if you're financially insecure, are you incentivized to go high risk, high reward, or are you just trying to make the cut and earn your like ticket?
Yeah, well, now we're getting into like trying to get the game theory of how these golfers are thinking, which I think is going to be pretty challenging. But I do think it's an interesting angle. I do think it's interesting.
Yeah, no,
but
I
some
think
of these guys might affect them differently.
If you had like, if you had a ready-made opinion on it, then like that. I mean, but like I agree, it's hard, and that's why like I give it no weight until I have a good.
Yeah, this guy Rob Oppenheim. I think I have the right golfer. I believe was it at the Pebble event? I think it was at the Pebble event. And he basically was in a situation where last year he missed the PGA Tour card by like $200 in earnings, and the year before he made it by $100, and he was going into Sunday in like 4th place. But if he got top 10 that week, he got to play the PGA event next week. But then he still had the win equity of winning this, which would open all sorts of doors for a long time. And obviously he was trailing Spieth in this specific tournament, so the win equity was diluted pretty heavily, but still incentive to chase. And they're saying, do you go out there and try to win it? And they asked Nick Faldo, and he's like, yeah, you absolutely have to go out there and win it. But I wonder how much of him was thinking if he had a shot where he's like watching the scoreboard, like, oh, I could lay up here and lock in top 10. But if I go for it and miss and have this error, I could have a bad score and drop out of the top 10. So it's really interesting. And he'd be the perfect circumstance. But I guess the common thought process is what you have to play to win.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Maybe we can find some data with career earnings or something and do that as a study down the road. All right, well, let's move on to this week's tournament, which is the Honda Classic, and we're going to try a new structure for the podcast. Normally what we do at this point is we'll quickly talk about the course, and then we will go into our tiers. So we'll talk about value tiers, middle tiers, and then the high price studs, and just talk about which guys we like. I think we're going to do a little bit differently this week. We're going to have some different categories of golfers. We'll in just a second, we'll actually talk about the course and do course fit and stuff like that. But I do want to give a little more time to specific categories of guys, like guys who really fit with course history, guys we might fade with course history. I want to talk about who the chalk is, maybe contrarian players from the chalk, recent players that are playing well, and what our thoughts are on those. So instead of just, a pure, like, I like this guy for his dollar, I think breaking these guys down into different categories of golfers, the chalk versus the contrarian pivots, I think is actually going to be potentially more useful for building tournament lineups and cash lineups as well. So we're going to give this a shot this week. We always encourage feedback on Twitter, or you can email the show at podcast@fantasylabs.com. But this is what we're going to do. So let's jump right into it. Again, this is the Honda Classic. It is in Palm Beach, Florida, and it is at PGA National Golf Club there, the Champion course. It has been there since 2007. So we have pretty significant amount of data here on the course. Colin, before we get into sort of talking about which golfers specifically fit, what type of golfer fits this course?
So this is a weird one. I think the way the data breaks out is I think I swear I say this for at least a bunch of tournaments a year, but like this really is the weakest course fit that I've seen in a while. Maybe like a fifth of the strength of, I'd say, average course fit. So it's basically subject to noise at this point. I don't know why that is, but like even as far as like who's getting the slightest bump, it's Bombers, which surprises me because it's a par 70, and all else being equal, I would have thought it would have been accuracy. I don't know if it's just maybe it's a Florida course, so it got rained on a bunch, and rain makes this a distance-friendly course, but the structure of it would otherwise convey accuracy, and maybe that's why it's such a weak course fit. But this is a weird one, and I'm almost comfortable. Like after they run it this year, my opinion on course fit could very well change to accuracy based on the results if it's a quote-unquote typical year. So I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if I need to fall back on fundamentals and skip the data and go more towards the eye test. And in order to do that, I need to know what the eye test is. So, Pete, what do you have for me here?
I lean accuracy course here with the par 70 and looking at some of the guys who have done well, but definitely don't have a ton of conviction, especially based on what you just said. So, yeah, I mean, you look at some of the guys who've done well here, their accuracy. And my boy Russell Knox has crushed here. You know, Luke Donald, Graham McDowell. There's some other guys that are more accuracy type players. So in that regard, I can see it par 70. I do think that the long irons are big. And from watching this tournament, people don't hit drivers often. So players who do well with longer clubs, but not necessarily the driver, so not like the driver wedge game, I think have an advantage here. So it's interesting. I don't have a ton of conviction on it, but do have some golfers I think stand out just because we have interesting pricing this week.
Yeah, so let's get into specific golfers. Colin, what golfers have played well here, and then what are your thoughts on those guys specifically? Are if there's really very limited course fit, that's a data perspective. There's no real type of golfers that fit. Does that mean that the guys who have played well, that's noisy as well, and that you might be more apt to fade those? I mean, you're sort of always fading those guys, but would you be more apt to fade them this week in particular?
No, I don't I don't think that I mean, is that from you're asking from an ownership perspective?
Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't think that this is admittedly purely hypothetical, but I would actually be surprised if people adjusted, ownership was actually correlated with the strength of course fit. Because think about all the recommendations, what drives ownership, right? It's a lot of people are listening to what other people are saying, and they don't want degrees of course fit. They just want give me bombers or give me accuracy guys, right? Mm-hmm. And they make their decision from there. They make their decisions from there, and not with degrees of we'll give them this boost or that boost, right? I think so. I'm not going to fade people based on I don't think it increases or decreases the merit to fade. I think I can give I have a pretty clear cut, all right, course history is this or that for these different people. So it's the equal weight. Your original question though was all right, so who do I like based on here in course history, right? The people that are getting the biggest boost by far, number one for sure, is Sean O'Hare, who I swear I saw that I said him about Pebble Beach, and that bore out. He definitely fought back on that one for sure. But if I look at he's always been kind of a, low 100, top 100 golfer. And he's relative to his level, it's one miscut, but there's otherwise 3 top 25s. I count that as great course history for what his price is. The other guy that I'm excited to rep on the course history angle this week is in fact Stewart Cink, who I didn't get on the right side of him last time that I saw him here, or recommended him last time, but I think he will be low owned. I know we're not getting into ownership yet, but I think his results are very friendly for this course in particular relative to it's basically on the strength of making a lot of cuts, not necessarily posting up a lot of finishes, but he has the best chance of making the cut anybody here relative to his price. Mm-hmm. And then third, I would be remiss as much as I hate giving Pete any credit, and it's not really even giving credit. And I think Russell Knox has really good course history here. I don't know that I like him. I'm always bearish on him in general. I'm still bearish on him in general this week, but if you like the course history angle, it's tough to argue with Russell Knox. So those
give me the Russell Knox this week.
All right, you take him. All right,
I'm on Russell Knox. He got screwed with the Ryder Cup still. He's still on the revenge narrative. I mean, all this is very subjective, but I like the course fit for Knox, and I like the course history. Great ball striker.
Would you like him sort of just as much, Pete, even if he had never played at this course before? Or is that
not as much as I like him now. I think that the course history angle is nice as well. But, the higher cost will hopefully keep his ownership somewhat reasonable, because I do think a lot of people are going to flock to him. But I do like him this week. And, it's harder to spend up in certain spots. So he actually fits in a lot of lineups. So I think he's a pretty good play. Another guy that I think is interesting is Sergio. He has good course history here.
Really good, yeah.
Yeah, I think that he's a pretty nice play. Ryan Palmer's just been falling off a cliff, but he also has good course history here, so that's interesting. And then some other names, Graham McDowell I mentioned before, Luke Donald. There's some other guys that I think are interesting. Patton Kazire, I know. Colin, you've liked him a couple times, right?
Yeah, a
Maybe
couple
not
times, like back in the October circuit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So an interesting thing. So, Adam Scott won this tournament last year, and I'm sure we can talk a little bit more about Adam Scott later because he is, maybe the hottest golfer in this tournament. He has the highest odds to win, and he won last year. I really love looking at the the ownership of these high stakes entries. And, one guy that we had discussed last week who had been playing poorly, but had a really good course fit and good course history was Bubba last week. And if you just look on our PGA ownership dashboard, he was lower in the higher stakes, and he was only in one Thunderdome lineup where he was, almost 15% in like the $3. So a lot lower. So Pete, is that something that, you think that is there an edge there, just fading course history, course fit, just because those guys are probably going to see elevated ownership?
Yeah, there's sometimes merit. I think it's really dynamic, and that's what kind of makes DFS fun. I mean, Bubba, I wasn't thrilled about it. Colin was definitely bearish. And it was one of those things where he still was somewhat owned, but yeah, it's tough. Those are the situations that are always tough figuring out. Because like someone like KJ Choi, didn't he still make the cut? That was the immovable object versus the unstoppable force.
Yeah, unstoppable force meets immovable object.
Yeah.
I still don't feel bad about fading KJ because it's not like he didn't put up his top 5 that he did last year. So it's like,
you don't feel bad fading him, but it does give merit to course history, in my opinion, like a little bit. Like each case is a super small amount, but Troy's not making cuts right now. He's just a disaster. And him making the cut is like him winning the tournament.
No, it really is.
No, I think the does course history matter debate it's resolved in my mind. I guess it's still going on. I don't know. I don't really pay attention to that stuff.
But it's tough to figure out like how much the public's really on that, because Choi, from the talks that I've seen on Twitter, just like PGA Twitter, and like even like our buddy Adam Levitan, friend of the podcast, Levitan, called him Chalk Choi, and then he was like 1% owned in all these tournaments. So.
He called him Chalk Choi because he wanted the double alliteration. He liked the way it sounded. Come on,
and Bok Choi, which is
Bok Choi.
And Bok Choi is the I know, but like he actually he was high on him, and like there were guys that I respect that legit, were interested in him because of his elite course history, but then he just wasn't owned. So I'm just having trouble like deciphering like whether people even care that much about it, or these guys are already good plays and they happen to have good course history.
So Brian, I can answer that question actually here, because this is a shameless plug for our FantasyLabs ownership model. Not everybody listens to all other people equally, right?
Sure.
And the nifty thing about what we have going on in the ownership model is it figures out who people listen to disproportionately more than others. I think whoever you think is touting him is clearly not moving ownership. I don't know. We don't need to name names, or I don't know who you're talking about, but like, I think that will be borne out about like some people move the needle more than others.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. All right, so let's get into another one of our segments, and this is going to be sort of similar. If you listen to our NFL pod, we're going to talk just about the guys that we think are going to be chalky for good or bad reasons, whatever. We have projected ownership, so we can start there. So Pete, I'll kick to you first here. Who are the guys that you think are going to be the chalkiest of the weekend? And I'm curious, Adam Scott is the guy that we just mentioned, and there's no heavy favorite. I mean, Adam Scott is under 10% implied odds to win the tournament, but he won this last year, and he's been crushing lately. So are you surprised about how low his odds are? And then who do you think is going to be the chalk? Do you think he'll be chalk along with some of the guys you might like?
I think Sergio is going to be chalk. I think he's going to be super chalk. I think he'll probably be one of the highest owned guys, given the course history and how well he's playing and the lack of other studs and the savings that you get with him versus Adam Scott. So I think he'll be one of the highest owned guys. Russell Knox, I think, will be pretty heavily owned. Adam Scott will be pretty heavily owned. And then we have this tier of guys that are kind of all in the same range that I think are going to gobble up a ton of ownership. Charles Howell, Kevin Kisner, Brendan Steele, Daniel Berger, even Brooks Koepka. I think those guys will all garner a good bit of ownership. So after that, I think it's going to be pretty spread out relatively to other tournaments, which is kind of nice. I do think that Tyler Hatton will be heavily owned. I like him quite a bit this week. Gary Woodland should be another guy. But it's pretty spread out after that. I mean, I'll be curious to see someone like Thomas Peters, my boy, who doesn't have the traditional great course fit, very inaccurate, but we'll see how he plays coming off a great showing. But he doesn't have course history here. So, yeah, Colin, what do you think about all those guys?
I mean, you pretty much named everybody that I thought would be up there for sure. I think Sergio is going to be, if I had to do a number one, I'd probably go Sergio. I'd still probably put Adam Scott up there. I mean, I know we're not talking about, like, do you like it? Like, Brian's only asking who's going to be owned, not is it the correct decision. I think Adam Scott is going to be over-owned here for sure. Anytime, like, I just look at his price and say, like, it's not the same thing as getting DJ or Spieth for $12K and above. Mm-hmm. This is a much more wide-open tournament. And, like, I get it that he won this, like, last year. I actually have the miscut that he has in his history as basically negating that win because he was so hot when he won it last time that it's like, yeah, he won it because he was like Adam Scott in God mode, not because like it was like he's a great fit for this course.
Is he not in God mode right now? I mean, he's been crushing lately.
Yeah, like I mean, well, lately
I would say God mode though.
Yeah. Fair.
It's one tournament lately. I mean, it was a good showing, but
sure,
like it's just like, I'm not ready to say like, all right, he's got it figured out. Like he's back to that like great run streak. The only other names that Pete that you didn't mention that I think are going to be up there, I think Brandon Grace at his price point is probably because he was like, I mean, he was above 15% last time. He's still cheap. He had a good showing. I see him being relatively chalky for the value range. And the other one I go back and forth on because the model says it'll be high owned, and I go back and forth is Louis Oosthuizen. And a lot of that is because he was heavily owned when he's 6,700. He's 9,400 now. If I had to guess over under on the model, I'd probably guess under. But I think Oosthuizen has always been one of those people that's just a little bit more disproportionately owned to how good he is. I've always been bearish on him. I don't see a reason to stop that. The other one that I am super interested on, because I don't know how much it translates, is Rafael Cabrera Bello. He is the chalkiest of the chalk on the Euro slates. Mm-hmm. And I don't have a clear picture as far as how Euro ownership may translate into PGA ownership. Euro fields are a lot smaller. They're a lot more subject to the same 12 people having strong opinions, and he's massively popular over there, and I don't know how much that'll translate. So, Pete, I'll set a line, maybe adjusting, maybe doing, like, I won't say which case I'm going, over under 15% on Rafa.
I'll take under.
Okay, yeah.
I think he'll be – I bet I'd take over 10.
Okay, yeah, that's like, yeah, I actually, like, I have him, like, essentially at around 12. I wanted to inflate it a little bit to try to give, like, all right, maybe there's some carryover, but, like, yeah, I don't know, like, let me ask the general form of that, Pete. How well do you think Euro ownership translates to PGA ownership when it's mostly Eurocentric players coming over?
I bet it's a little bit, but not much. Not much. I think it's just so different. It depends. I mean, it is interesting. We have a lot of Euro guys and you don't have a lot of the studs. I mean, you put a lot of Euro guys in the field and you have all the guys who soak up ownership, the top studs. It's going to be different than something like this week. So I think it's an interesting question, certainly something to consider. But, yeah, you can also look at your contest. I mean, there's a lot of stuff if you really want to get into it. You can figure out who your opponents might play and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk pivots from these guys. If they're going to be super high owned, and Colin, you mentioned just from a game theory perspective, if DJ is going to be 50% owned last week, which, you know, he was approaching that, you know, probably the smart play over the long run is to fade him. I don't think that we're expecting any guys from this week to get up anywhere near that, but there's probably going to be some game theory plays. You know, especially Sergio and Adam Scott up at the top. So, Pete, I'll kick to you here. in that range, like the upper range, like who is the guy that you're going to pivot off of Sergio in a tournament?
Yeah, there's really not much to do. I mean, I guess you go to Justin Thomas. I'm not going to play Ricky, so it's kind of tricky what to do in the top range. I think the more interesting questions come down to kind of the upper top tier,
Like
or I should say,
range.
Yeah, like the 8 to 9K range, and then I think there's a lot of pivots in the mid sevens. Guys in that range I like. Emiliano Grillo, obviously our lover last year's kind of fallen off a little bit, but still solid game log. Definitely an accuracy guy. I like him quite a bit. He's only 7,600. I think he's a really nice play. Probably will still be somewhat owned, so it's not like an amazing pivot. Matthew Fitzpatrick kind of fits that mold as well. Stewart Cink was someone I was going to bring up, but Colin already brought him up. I think he really makes a ton of sense. And then outside of that, it's really tricky in terms of some of these guys. I mean, I know Colin's probably going to bring up Paris English again because he just can't get off the English train. But, Scott Stallings is a guy he might bring up too. It's tricky. I like some of the guys that I think are going to be somewhat owned, but I don't think will garner a ton of ownership like I talked about with Grillo and Fitzpatrick. And then outside of that, I'm hoping Colin has a couple good guys up his sleeve because I'm not loving some of these plays. Some of the young talent I've been picking in certain spots for ownership reasons in tournaments like Grayson Murray. Not sure this is a great fit for him, but maybe it is. Hudson Swafford, I normally like to take more at a Bombers course. So, yeah, same with Garrigus and some of these other guys that have been low on that I've been taking so far. So, curious what Colin has.
So ownership is always an interesting, all right, well, how much, do you want ownership to drop for the sake of pivot purposes, and how much equity in terms of, point outcomes do you want to give up, right? I think you hit a lot of my guys, like Grillo, especially in English, in terms of, I think they're definitely going to be sub 10 and definitely down there compared to some of the other mid-range chalk, like Bryan Grace. Other guys I put in that category, Billy Horschel is someone that I always seem to mention. It's more of an overall thing. He doesn't have great course fit here at all, great course history. But it's, again, to what degree should that depress ownership? I think Lucas Glover is kind of in a similar spot. He's always kind of had the characteristic of a boomer bust for sure. I think he's been off the radar forever. I could see him being decently low owned, and I agree with your assessment of Grillo. If you want to go sub 4% projected owned, and depending on if you really want to get extreme, I actually like Hudson Swafford for that exact reason. I mean, all else being equal, no, it's not great course history for the same reason. But distance will get you there, and there still is a win on the books that basically puts his long-term adjusted around in decent shape. If you want some course history to kind of give you some assurance, I think Luke List will be on nobody's radar this week, and he actually has not terrible course history to back it up. I think he will be under 5%. He's probably my pound for pound favorite sub 5% play. And then the other option, and I go back and forth on essentially this type of player, is Michael Kim, who I've talked about last year, and that he's one of those classic, really great at making the cuts, but not good enough to finish really great. And there have been some other non-DFS analytics people like Richie Hunt and the people at 15th Club who've talked about him being interesting for that exact reason. He's just he's almost that good, really good in the first and second rounds, not great in the third and fourth, that ends up making his average outcome pretty good. But does he have enough upside to get you in the top 10? And I know that I kind of don't believe in upside in a lot of reasons, and I've talked about that before, but there is something to it where it's what do you do with someone who's great to make the cut and maybe has if you believe in ceiling, has a ceiling of top 20, but he'll be super low owned and is super cheap. So I don't know what you do with a guy like that, but he'll be
that does bring up an interesting question, and something that we'll discuss on our NBA podcast, or Pete and the guys discuss on NFL podcasts. If you're looking for a guy to pivot, there's a type of guy usually that you want. Number one is that if you're going to pivot from a chalky guy, obviously you want the guy that you're pivoting to have lower ownership. I mean, just by definition of a pivot. But also in a sport like NBA and NFL, you also want a guy with potentially similar upside. So you're not taking like a really hit in value necessarily. So I mean, that's like what you want from a pivot is similar upside with lower ownership, and maybe it's a less safe play. Is there that sort of thing, Pete, in golf? I mean, like if you're looking for a pivot, are you looking for a guy that has similar upside or that can make the cut, or is golf just sort of a different animal that way?
Yeah, it's a little different animal because there's so much variance in both of those things. But yeah, you want to capture guys who have upside. You want players, if you're going to take flyers or take a contrarian stand with a lot of exposure to one guy, I think you'd much rather focus on the upside. I think that's definitely the way to go because it's the way tournaments are structured. But one risk you have is if you start loading up on a lot of these guys, I mean, you can really bomb out. And it's tough too. Some of these guys you're taking a lot of risk on that don't have great cut making. You can have a great week, hit all the rest of your picks, but if you're just loaded up on one or two guys that are really volatile and they both miss the cut, obviously that hurts a ton. So I think it's kind of an art. I think it's trying to figure out when and where to take the risks. And I definitely think it makes sense to be leveraged and to have some contrarian picks, but I definitely think going all boom or bust is a little too risky.
Yeah, and the kind of wrinkle and the differentiation between NBA is I think upside in NBA is a little bit more of a predictable player property than it is in golf. Only because I tried to look at that earlier in golf, and I'm kind of more partial to the line of the only thing that's predictable is cut making and not going off in a top 10. I'm sure there are some guys who truly can't get there, and there are exceptions that don't fit the rule of the general case. So I'm open to all right, there are some guys who just who can't get there in the echelon. But I kind of struggle to figure out why. You can always invent a reason why, but in general, I think upside is a less predictive property in the NBA. And that's why I'm willing to say all right, let's just take cut makers for cheap guys and hope they go off. That could be a leak though. I don't know. I can talk myself in circles on this one.
Yeah.
And I will for the next few minutes. Keep letting me talk, so I'll pass the mic now, so it's fine.
Okay.
It's a never-ending game that we're all trying to get better at. That's just the nature of it.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. If we figured it out, we wouldn't be doing podcasts every week. All right, so let's keep on moving, and only just a couple more segments here. The next one I want to discuss is maybe guys off the radar plays, or maybe just guys we haven't really discussed yet, that may not be a course fit or don't have course history or won't be chalky, but have just been playing really well. I mean, these guys, you can just sort by recent adjusted round in our models and find these guys. I mean, the guys that stand out to me that have a high recent adjusted round but are, a pretty decent price. A guy that we've discussed before, Ollie Schneiderjans, and Jonathan Vegas is another guy. Gary Woodland sort of stands out. These are guys in sort of the mid-tier range that may not fit the course, may not have a ton of history here, but have played well. Pete, who stands out in that sort of category of golfer for you this week?
Thomas Pieters, my boy, of course. I mean, that's the guy I want to take. I mean, I know it's really one result, but I think that he has a lot of upside and wouldn't surprise me if he ended up being more expensive down the road here. So I like him quite a bit. I think Woodland makes sense. But, yeah, Colin, you got a couple guys for us?
I don't know. I think we covered a lot. I mean, those are basically the ones that I would have said Pieters and Woodland for sure. I mean, Pieters' only thing is no course history, adjust as you will. Woodland has a little bit more. So, maybe Woodland's a little bit more expensive. I have him as a little bit higher. But I don't hate Pieters in the slightest. I didn't hate him last week as a pivot either, for a bunch of reasons. But yeah, I basically agree with those two picks more than anything.
Well, what do you think about Ollie, Colin?
Ollie's big. Okay, Ollie. I don't think he even makes the top half of the field here. Honestly, I think. Oh no, I lied. He's up there, but I think that's bad value. I think he's going to be very heavily owned based on recent results. Yeah. I prefer a million guys to him. There's just too much data from the web.com tour on this guy with like not a lot of like flyer worthy results. I think strength of field matters. I'd rather have PGA mainstays than someone who like I've been through this with Ollie when he debuted last year at the British Open. Like, no, I'm not fooled by like the young guys like this. Why are you asking me about a young guy when you know that I'm just going to be a crotchety old man on a rocking chair on a front porch saying, "Get off my lawn"?
Just set me up, man. After that 30-minute brag at the beginning of the podcast, I had to set you up for that one.
That's fair.
All right, let's wrap this pod up with something that I would like to do moving forward here. Something that I thought was really cool about the NFL podcast was just putting your money where your mouth is. Just making some bets here. We can bet whatever we want, whether it's beer, whether it's pride, or whatever it may be. But just I think it's actually a really useful thinking process. It makes you think about whether you would actually take one guy versus the other, or really analyze those type of things. So Pete, you're definitely used to this sort of thing on the NFL podcast. So I'll kick it off to you if you want to start betting Colin on any things. Maybe you could give Colin some equity and take Peters.
All right. Well, I think we should continue with our streak of picking winners. I think that's the best way to do it. And then I'll throw out a skill game prop.
Okay. You
guys can take it or not, and then we can keep going with the skill game props if you guys want to throw any out there. But
sure.
What's the order for picking right now?
Bryan won, so I think he has to go last. I don't even know if that's right.
All right. Well, I haven't gone first in a while, so I'll take Adam Scott. I'll take Adam Scott.
Okay, that's good. Like,
I feel like there's a pretty clear number two.
I'm going Sergio. Yeah.
I feel like that was definitely the clear number two.
I think there's a clear number three, unless you want to go contrarian against Colin's hated guy.
I think there's an argument. I don't think it's clear cut.
Are you talking about Knox right now?
No.
I'll take JT. I'll take Justin Thomas.
I thought it was a good number three. Yeah, was that your clear cut?
I thought it was Justin Thomas. I thought I thought him or Fowler.
It's clear cut. No, I mean, like, no, there's an argument for Fowler. Like,
when you said contrarian, I thought you were talking about Knox. But
no, I thought Fowler. Sorry, so you get the next guy, 9K or less. So go.
A 9K or less. Okay. I will go 9K or less. I'm gonna go Woodland. I like Woodland.
Colin?
I actually like a lot of other people, but I'd rather just make Pete possibly upset, so I had to take Russell Knox here.
Oh, you're such a fuck.
No. I thought it was under 9K.
Is it under 9K?
It's under 9K.
Oh, under 9K? Okay.
Yeah. So, I would have taken Russell Knox at 9K. Come on.
Okay, no, under 9K. All right, then I'll go to my default. This is good. I'm just gonna keep
Brendan Steele.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's gonna work eventually.
Shocker.
Give me Daniel Berger. I think it's under Casey.
That's a really good.
I'm going to go Berger. So I got Scott, but I feel good about that. In terms of props, we'll get some action on Knox right now. I'll take Knox. And either I'll let you go with anyone under 10K versus him. So you can take ZJ, Oosthuizen, any of these guys. Or I'll let you take two golfers, or let's say like above 7K, and I'll take someone under 7K with Knox.
Okay, hang on. So I got two under.
You can take 2 7 to 9K, or you can take one any other golfer that's under 10K versus Knox.
Oh no, I'm taking the.
If you take the 2, then I get to take a fourth golfer, but it has to be under 7K.
Okay, no, done. Okay, I'm taking that middle. So like I get anybody between 7 and 9K basically.
Yeah.
Okay. I would make Steele with one of these, but I basically have them already, so I'm gonna hedge. I'm going to go like, oh man, I should hang on. Pete, you took Berger, right?
No, you can take him if you want.
No, I know, but I'm wondering, do I reverse? No, I want, I need a clear.
You want a clean win.
Exactly. So I'm going to go Woodland and Hatton.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll go Steele and Hatton versus you, Pete, and I'll keep up with this so we can brag about it next week.
Yeah.
Steele and Hatton. Yeah, that's tough though. Yeah, you got your fourth guy though.
Yeah, pick your sub 7.
Yeah, the sub 7 guy is really tough to pick.
There's no good sub 7.
I really put myself in a bad spot here.
Yeah, that was a bad line you just said. Thank you.
No problem. Is it 7 or under? I have to be sub 7. I'm good. Damn it.
No,
All right, I'll go Siwoo Kim. Why not?
Throwing names out of a hat. Oh man. All right.
So Colin,
I haven't looked at it extensively.
Colin, what is the worst golfer you take heads up against Louis?
The worst golfer that I take.
I'm gonna go take my young guy. I'm gonna take Grayson Murray instead.
Grayson Murray.
Okay. All right.
The cheapest golfer.
The cheapest golfer that I take against Louis?
Yeah, heads up, yeah.
Stewart Cink.
Like you think that's a 1-to-1? Do you think that's even?
I think it's close. Yeah. If you gave me, I think it's close.
That's interesting. Okay. Interesting.
Is there any one guy that you want to get someone on? Either one, Bryan or Colin.
No, I mean, like, I try to, like, I want to do you on a Peters bet, but, like, I don't think there's, like, I can't offer.
I'll take Peter. How about this? I'll take Grillo and Peters, and you can take, again, the same thing. Anyone that you haven't already named that's under 9K.
Grillo
any
and
two guys.
Okay, under 9K. Like, all
Grillo
right.
and Peters. You can take any two guys. Under 10K, I'll even give you. Fine.
Under 10K. Oh wow. Okay.
I mean, that doesn't open up any. That only opens up like Knox and Oosthuizen.
Can't take Knox. He's already been mentioned.
Okay. Like, yeah, I can't. Like,
there's some good guys though, like Powell and Willard and Brendan Grace.
Oh, go. You get Rafa. Get Rafa.
I don't. It's okay. All right. So here you got Grillo and Peters.
Yeah. Give
me 3 guys under 8K.
Fine, sure. Whatever you want, Colin.
Okay. All right. Grillo and Peters. Are we just doing max of all of them?
Yeah, whoever gets the highest score.
Okay, that's fine. All right. Grillo and Peters versus Howell, Koepka, and
you're giving me a guy under 7K now too, by the way.
Sure, like that's a discard pile. O'Hare.
Okay, yeah, I got the perfect guy here. I'm gonna go Luke List as my third guy.
That's the best. That's the least worst option. Like it's a good pick outside of Harris English, who is just the nuts every week. I will not was. Yeah. All right, Bryan, set a line.
Set a line. Oh, gosh.
What do you want, Bryan?
Who do I want here?
You love Rafa so much. Why don't you marry him?
Okay, yeah, I'll take Rafa. Rafa versus anyone.
I'll take Fitzpatrick versus your Rafa.
Okay,
just make that easy.
Yeah,
what do you want?
I'll give all right. I'll take someone under Rafa's price just to make it interesting.
Sure. Yeah. 8K or lower. Yeah. Fitzpatrick, same price.
Oh, you know what I love? Because like there's a little bit of rain in the forecast. Keegan Bradley.
I knew you were gonna take Keegan Bradley. I knew you were.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, I'll go Ollie versus Keegan against you.
Oh, done. Shit, I'm taking out a mortgage on that. Oh, shipped. Yes.
All right, we got some good ones, boys. That was fun.
Okay. Yeah, we'll keep. I
love that variety. Oh man, someone's gonna have to do some accounting on all these.
Yeah, Bryan, you're gonna have to do so. Yeah. You're gonna have to do the Friedman accounting. So we're putting some Coors Lights or future beers in our next trip on this.
We're gonna. I'm a craft beer drinker, so I respect Friedman, but we're gonna have to come up with a different sponsor of the podcast.
I'm actually on Bryan.
If you guys want to do any beers, then we're in a good shot. I did buy some sour beers, and those can be a little pricey. So.
That's perfect. That's my jam.
I will keep up with it, but we'll continue to do this. We'll continue our structure. We definitely welcome, feedback. So Colin, you're going to have to start, looking at your bets and, figuring out the lines that you want to get prior to the podcast.
All right. Well, it looks like I have another algorithm to write this weekend.
Exactly.
For this podcast. That's fine. Like I knew what I signed up for.
I love it. All right, boys, we will end it there. Thank you guys for listening as always. Good luck this week in the Honda Classic, and we will talk to you guys next week.